Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Bava Kamma daf Pei Dalid. We are near the top of Pei Dalid Amid Aleph. We are in the middle of answering the question: how do we know that when the Torah says an eye for an eye, it refers to paying money damages and not to actually taking the eye of the perpetrator who had, damage somebody and effectively remove their eye. So we've answered this question. We've offered one successful answer, and we offered one unsuccessful answer. Now, meaning when I say unsuccessful, I don't mean that we completely disproved it. It just doesn't have to be we showed that it isn't conclusive. So we've maybe I should say one unconclusive answer would be a little bit more accurate. But in any event, we're now going to pick up with a third effort of 9 different efforts. So we've got 7 more to go today. And we will end up being 4 out of 9 will be successful. So let's take a look and let's go to number 3. And so you can see I've numbered them. We're now on A3. So the Gemara offers a third potential answer to how we know an eye for an eye is not to be taken literally. And we pick up on the last of the narrow lines on Pei Dalet Amud Aleph at the 2 dots. So Tanya Idach, we got another brisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, Ayin tachas ayin mamon. That when we say an eye for an eye, it means money. So ata omer mamon. Now, you tell me that it means money. Oenu ela ayin mamish. How do I know that it doesn't mean the actual eye? It doesn't mean it literally. Hareisha hayasuma v'sime. Well, what about a blind person who goes ahead and blinds someone? Kitaya v'kita. Or a person who is amputated, has an amputated limb, and he amputates that and he severs that limb from somebody else. Or a somebody who's lame who causes another person to be lame. How do we fulfill it? Right? The Torah tells us that there's got to be one law for everybody. So here, there's no possibility of implying the law. So mishpat hashava l'kulchem, right? It's got to be the same law for everybody. So Amre, they explain, no, you don't you understand? My kushya, what kind of question are you asking about saying that that you can't have somebody, that you can't be taken literally because what happens if a blind person blinds somebody? Dilma heicha de efshar efshar. All you can do is what's possible, right? And so heicha de lo efshar lo efshar. If it's not possible, it's not possible. Ufatrina like, and we, and as a result, when it's not possible, we actually end up saying that the person is exempt. Dilo temahachi. Because if you don't tell me that, listen to the following. Treifa shaharagas hashalim. If you have somebody who has a condition that is going to cause their death within the coming year. Now, it's interesting because there's 2 different categories of near-death people in halacha. There's something called a goses. Goses is literally in the throes of death. Now, that throes of death can be a result of any of a variety of mechanisms. It could be caused by the outside. It could be somebody's bleeding to death. It could be, they've got some kind of condition and they're dying and they're on their deathbed. But it does not. We do not actually apply the same rule that we apply to a treifa. A treifa is somebody whose physical condition is such that they just cannot survive for a long period of time. It's just impossible. And so while a goses who is in the throes of death is not actually considered actually, let's back that up. There's an aspect where they're considered dead in the sense that a Kohen should not go and see a goses because of the proximity to death, and because we don't Kohanim need to be careful not to become tamei. But in general, if you were to kill a goses on some level, you have killed a real person. On the other hand, a treifa is considered almost like they're already dead. Now, this has very important ramifications if the person who is the murderer is the treifa. Okay, because the treifa shaharag hashalim. Because if you have, as we now back into the Gemara, to ilo temahachi. So we're at um, uh, uh, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines into the wide lines, fourth word on the line. To ilo temahachi, if you don't say that it doesn't make a difference, that we do it just when it's possible, then how would we ever engage in killing a murderer? Because we have the following case: treifa shaharagas hashalim. If a treifa kills a healthy person, my avdinan lay, what do we do with him? We can't execute him. And Rashi explains why not. Last of the wide lines of Rashi. My abdinan lay, ha gavra katilahu. It's as if the person's already dead. One of the principles of testimony is that all testimony has to be, there has to be a possibility of the testimony being testified as to its falsehood by saying that the witnesses were with us at the time that they said that this testimony. So, for example, if the witnesses don't actually give any information about the time associated with a particular testimony, well, then there's no way that you can undermine them, because all they can say is, oh, yes, well, we weren't talking about at that moment, right? Because they didn't give any time associated with it. So it's not possible to undermine them. So here too, because the testimony is, and why is it that daha imish takache edim zomamin? Because if you were to find that they were in fact edim zomamin, meaning that other people, other witnesses came and said that they were with them at the time that they were testifying about paturim, they would be pater de gavre katilu ba'u lemikdal, because they need to have they're only going to be liable for killing somebody that is somebody who is capable of being killed, and this person's not. V'hilkach ihu nami pater, and so as a result, this person himself, this Terefa himself, we can't testify against him, so he can never be liable. So he ends up also being pater. And we're going to learn this more in Masechet Sanhedrin. But the bottom line is that we have this odd situation where if somebody turns out to be a treifa, meaning that they've got something fundamentally wrong with them that is going to cause them to die very, imminently within the year for sure, so then they're considered dead and they're not capable of engaging, of being killed for murder. And so now we have all those psukim that we've talked about how you have to have one law for everybody, and yet we have the law of killing a murderer, and yet we have this example of a murderer who isn't going to get killed. So as a result, ella hega de efsher hega de lo efsher. So it's upatarinam. So we see this general rule that basically all we have to do is look at whether it's possible. And if it's not possible, we're not going to cause liability.
It's possible to kill him immediately and not wait till 12 months when you think he might be.
No, but the problem is that the testimony against him can't be undermined. We would never kill those witnesses, because if you were to, let's just back up and just note the following. If you were to kill this guy, you would not be chayav misa according to man, because you will have killed somebody who is, according to halacha, effectively viewed as already dead. And so that's exactly right. The point is that you could kill this guy, but the bottom line is that our halachic court system cannot. So that's the problem. And so we don't have a single law for everybody. Rather, it's where it's possible, it's possible. So we see that when we say that there's a single law for everybody, it doesn't get there. It's not an exception when you say where it's possible, it's possible. So as a result, this brisa is not going to be a conclusive proof that an eye for an eye means a monetary payment. Okay, so that the bottom line is that we can't apply. We will not. A court system will not And it's interesting because right, it took the perspective of the court system would not kill the treifa who kills a regular person, but it also is the case that the treifa would not kill a regular person who killed the treifa, and so it goes in both directions. But the bottom line is that we're not going to treat all murder similarly. So that's effort number 3. So now we go to effort number 4. Debay Rabbi Yishmael Tana. So we have the Rabbi Yishmael's yeshiva taught that Amar Kra. We have the pasuk Kain Yanasein Bo. So should be given to him, right? So for Ein Natina Elamamon. Well, when we talk about things that are given, we don't talk about injuries, wounds. We talk about money. And so as a result, the thing that you do to the perpetrator is you charge him money. So Elameata kasher yitain mumba adam. Well, 1 second, we had a few psukim earlier, or actually earlier in that same verse, it said, you're going to give a wound to a person. So hachinami demamonu, are you telling me that originally the injury that we're talking about in the first place somehow referred to money? Of course not. That can't be the case. We're talking about somebody who wounds somebody. So Amre, so they explained, no, you're not fully grasping the lesson here, because the point is the Bei Rabbi Yishmael Kra Yisei Darshi. What they're highlighting is that there's extra words in the Torah, and those words are coming to teach us this particular law. So michti, because let's take a look. So in pasuk, in pasuk yud tet vayikra kaf daled pasuk yud tet, it says that if a person gives a wound to another person, so as he did, so shall be done to that person. So the reference at the end of so now when we have so he Kenyan us in bo lamali. So why do I need the end of the next verse, which says essentially the same thing? So shall be given to him. That's extra. And so what do we use it for? Shmami na mamon. So it comes to teach us that that's a monetary payment. And so kasher, 1 second, kasher yitain mumba adam lamali. Well, 1 second, you need to now explain why you have the first part of that pasuk of parak kaf daled pasuk kaf in Vayikra. So Idi de boy lemichtav kenyasin bo ksav nami kasher yitain mumba adam. So the point is no, since we are going to use this language of natina in order to highlight the fact that we're talking about a monetary requirement, so too we're going to use the language of natina when we talk about giving the wound in order to create effectively a parallel structure. So the bottom line is that this is a valid proof, and now we have 2 proofs in favor, 2 proofs that didn't work. So we are on to number 5. Debay Rabbi Yechia Tana. So the Shiva Rabbi Yechia taught. So Amar Kra Yad Biyad. When it comes to Adam Zomamin, we say that you have to, that when he wanted to take a hand, so you take his hand, meaning you do to the Adam Zomamin what they had wanted to do to the other person. So davar hanatina miyad liyad, and again, same kind of concept that we are going to say that when we say yad biyad, it means that the thing that we're going to force the Adam Zomamin to do is do something that involves hand, giving something from one hand to another. My nihu, what is that? Mamon. It's referring to money. So ella meata regel baragel nami hachihu. Well, 1 second. If you're going to learn out regel baragel, what's the lesson there? Must be that there's no lesson there, so there shouldn't be any lesson from yad biyad. So Amri Debre Rabbi Chia Kra Yisera Kadarshi. No, you're misunderstanding. Again, the point is that these words yad biyad are extra. So Michti Ksiva Sisim Lo Kasher Zamam Lasos Lachib. That the Torah already told that you need to do exactly to the Adam Zomamin what they wanted to do to the other, to the person who they were testifying against. So Isal Kadaitak Mamish. So now maybe I might have thought that it meant doing the actual punishment. That maybe if you tell the person, if 2 people testify about somebody, about John, that he actually cut off Jim's hand, well then maybe because we're going to cause John to have to take care of that hand, So now we're going to, and now it turns out that those witnesses are Zomim. We'll do the same thing. We'll just cut off the hands of the Edom Zomim. So no, Yad b'yad, lamali, shmamina mamon. So the fact is that we don't need the words Yad b'yad. So as a result, it's coming to tell us that it's talking about money. 1 second. So regel baragel lamali. So again, our original question: if you're going to tell me what Yad b'yad means, that it's extra and it tells us something, well, what does ragel baragel teach us? Well, no, I need to exceed Yad b'yad kasav nami regel baragel. Well, once we were going to say a reference to one hand to another, we'll talk about 1 foot for a foot. So as a result, we now have, and this is the only moment in which this will be the case, we now have, the first explanation worked. So we had one, we were winning 1-0, and now we're winning 3-2, but now we're going to have a few that don't work. So all right, so let's take a look at the next proof. Proof number 6. Abaye Yomer Asyam Miditani Bechizkia. We've got something from the yeshiva Bechizkia. The Tanit Bechizkia, ayin tachas ayin, nefesh tachas nefesh. We have that an eye for an eye and a soul for a soul. So the low nefesh v'ayin tachas ayin. But what do we not say? We don't say a soul and an eye for an eye. But if you want to say that we're going to actually take the actual person's eye, zimnin de mishkakas la'ayin v'nefesh tachas ayin. We're going to end up finding sometimes that, God forbid, if the person poked out the person's eye and now you try to poke out his eye, maybe he's going to die as a result of it. So and of course, that will be over punishing. And we don't want to do that. The aver lay nafka lay nishmasei. And, at the time, because, and at the moment that you ended up blinding the guy, you ended up taking his soul, and that wouldn't be right. Umay kushya, but again, the Gemara says, 1 second, what kind of question is this? Because Dilma Meimad Amdinan lay, maybe we can say that you would just figure out, you'd estimate the ability of the person to withstand it. So imazi makabel abdinan, velo mazi makabel lo abdinan. If he's able to withstand it, we go ahead and blind the person, and if he's not, we won't. So the iyam dinan dematzi makabel, and if it turns out that he's able to do it, vavdinan be unifak ruche, and you do it and he dies, imayas lemus. If he dies, he dies. So because after all, Milo Tanan Gabi Malkus, didn't we learn when it came to lashes? Amdu umeis tachas yado patur. If they estimate that a person is capable of withstanding a certain number of lashes, and then they lash him and it turns out he's not capable, the person who imposed the lashes is exempt. So the bottom line is that there is no requirement what we're seeing is that the practicalities and the difficulties of the practicalities are not the reason that we're going to say that we can't do ayin ba'ayin, ayin tachas ayin. That the reason that we're not going to do ayin tachas ayin is because of drashot, not because of practicalities. The Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rabba Amar. So next one, Rav Zvid says Amar Kra Petza Takas Patza. The verse says that we're going to do a wound for a wound, and just to be 1 second, I didn't scroll. Okay, so so we have a wound for a wound. Now this there's a series of psukim that we have where it goes. Let's just find it because I have it somewhere here. Yes, it first says and a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, a bruise for a bruise. That's what the pasuk Shmo Kabbalah pasuk Kaf Hey says. And so here we're going to focus on Petzatakas Patza. So let's take a look. This is again proof number 7. So litain sar b'makom nezek. So this teaches that we do pain even when there's damage. The isal kadaitach mamish. Now, if we say that there's going to that you have to actually injure the person. When are you going to end up having to pay for pain? Because let's take a look at the perpetrator, right? We got Paul, the perpetrator. So Paul is the one who caused the injury. So now, and he chopped off John's hand. So Paul, we're going to chop off John's hand. We're going to chop off Paul's hand. Well, why would Paul need to pay for John's pain? We're going to end up causing that same amount of pain for Paul because we're going to chop off his hand. So we're going to cause pain for the other guy too. So maybe that's the reason that we can't have ayin tachas ayin mean it literally. So again, umay kusha. What kind of question is that? Because dilma ika inishtam mefanik. No, you're going to have two different people. Maybe the person that Paul injured, John, is a very, very sensitive person, and it was extraordinarily painful for him, and he would be willing to pay much, much more in order to avoid that pain. So Islate Saratzve, he's going to have more pain. Ve'ika inish delomavanik, and then maybe the person who caused the injury is not so delicate, and Leislate Sarah, she won't have pain. So Lamai Nafkamina, and so as a result, what difference does it make? So Lomeisvele Heich the Bani. And in fact, Paul would end up having to pay the difference in the amount of pain that each one would be willing to pay. So when we took somebody who's like John, and we asked him how much would he be willing to pay, and he said $1,000. And we took somebody who's like Paul, and we asked him how much would he be willing to accept, how much would he pay to avoid, would he, take or pay to avoid this issue? And he says $500. So we'd end up having Paul pay $500. So as a result, the fact that we have to pay for pain does not show that in fact we don't do the same injury. All right, so Rav Papa Mishmei de Rava Amar. Well, when Rav Papa offers another one, Amar Krav Rapo Yirapei. You got to do healing. Litain Refuah b'makom nezek. So again, same concept. So here as well, we have to pay for healing even when there's also a pain. There's also some kind of damage situation. And if you would say that an eye for an eye is literal, so we're going to cause the damage to the perpetrator. So just as this one needs healing, the other one is going to need healing, right? The perpetrator is going to need healing. So again, my kusher, what kind of question is that? Because Dilma Ika Desalik Bisrei Haya, maybe one person will heal, their flesh will heal faster. The Ika Delo Slalik Bisrei Haya, and the other one whose body's not going to heal as quickly. So Lamai Nafkamina, and what difference does it make? Again, Lamesiv Hale. You're right. You're going to have to. One person is going to need a lot more medication, and so as a result, there's going to be a higher charge for that. And if the victim is the one who has the higher charge, so then the perpetrator is going to need to pay the difference. And so that can be an explanation for why this wouldn't be. There's no problem with implementing an eye for an eye. So again, proof 7, 6, 7, and 8 have now all been unsuccessful. So now proof number 9, our final proof that will be successful, Rav Ashi Amar, Asya Takas Mishor. We actually learn a Gzereshava because of this, the word takas. And in particular, we learn it from the takas next to an ox, because ksiv haka, ayin takas ayin, we say an eye for an eye, and uksiv hasam, and when it's with respect to an ox, it says shalem short takas ashor. You actually have to pay an ox for an ox. So it's clear that when we say an ox for an ox, or an ox in the place of an ox, it means that you have to pay. So malahalan mamon, afkan mamon. So just as over there it means money, so too here. Well, one second, Mike causes the yalfat takas mishor. Why would you choose this particular takas by an ox? Nelo takas mi adam. There's another takas that exists in the Torah that is written in connection with the person. And in that situation, diksiv v'nasata nefesh takas nefesh. There we're saying where you have to give a life for a life. So mala halan mamish av kan mamish. That one's talking about murder, where you actually kill the murderer. So maybe just as you kill the murderer, so too we're going to cause an injury to the person who caused the injury. So dana nizikin minizikin ve'ein danan nezikin v'misa. No, we don't want to learn injury. We want to learn injuries from injuries. So we'll take a look at the takas that's by injury by a person and learn from the takas by injury by an animal. Whereas we won't do that for won't learn it from death. Well, one second, adarabba, done an adam adam ve'ein done an adam behema. Why should we learn from an animal? Let's learn from a person. So rather than an animal. So Ella Amar Ravashi highlights mitachas asher ina yelefla. No, we also have a second Gzeira Shava, because the Gzeira Shava also covers the situation where a man violates a virgin and he has to pay the girl's father for the damage that he does. And there as well, it says tachas, and so that he has to pay for the affliction that he caused. So adam may adam unazikin uminazikin. So as a result, we now can use the takas of ayin takas ayin and say that we're learning from two things. We're learning from adam. We're learning from another situation involving human beings. In the case of a man who violates a woman who's a virgin, who's a child, a young lady, unazikin minazikin, and we're also learning injury from injury in connection with the ox. So as a result, we are now learning fully from Tachas more completely when we learn that it talks about money than when we learn that it talks about actually implementing the same damage. And this highlights, by the way, that the fact that we would ask all these questions highlights two things. One is Gzeira Shava is not something that we make up, meaning that the Gzeira Shava needs to have sort of some tradition that's associated. We can't just say, well, it says Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor over here, and it says Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor over there, and so let's do a Gzeira Shava between those two psukim, and we'll say that some kind of law should apply in the two situations. We don't just make up the Gzeira Shavas, but at the same time, when we have a Gzeira Shava, it's not always 100% clear that what the tradition that's passed down is associated with the relevant words, not necessarily the particular location. And so here we're going to ask, well, how do you know it's the word over here as opposed to the word over somewhere else? So that's just some additional background. So now that we've done this, we've successfully offered 4 proofs in favor, countered 5 efforts, and the bottom line is of course we say that we do not take an eye for an eye literally. Now, one second, we have a brisa that seems to suggest otherwise, especially according to Rabbi Eliezer. So Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, ayin takas ayin mamish. We have to do an eye for an eye literally. Whoa, mamish salgadayt. You really think that it means literal? Debay Eliezer leisle kachol hani tanoi. Could it be that the Rebbe Eliezer and his entire yeshiva would disagree with I'm sorry, Rebbe Eliezer leisle dekol hani tanoi? Rebbe Eliezer doesn't hold like all these other ones. That can't be. So Amarabba lomar she'ein shaman oto ke'eved. No, it means that we don't measure the person as if he was a slave. Well, one second, Amar le Abaye, elakaman keven chorin ben chorin mi isle demei. Well, one second, how do you estimate the person? Are you going to say that you estimate him like a free person? A free person doesn't have a value. So how do you do that? Ella Amar Ravashi explains, Lomar she'ein shaman oto benizak ella b'mazik, that the person that we assess is not the one who was damaged, but the one who caused the damage. So again, this goes back to something that we saw earlier, that sometimes that there are certain situations where we'll focus not on the victim, but on the assailant. And so here too, we're going to say that according to Rabbi Eliezer, we're going to focus on the damage that how much that eye was worth to the assailant. So, for example, again, the example would be: person pokes out the eye. Peter pokes the eye out of John. So John's eye was worth $500 on the slave market, meaning if with the eye he was worth $500 more than without the eye. But it turns out, for whatever reason, Paul's worth $1,000 more with the eye than without the eye. So it turns out that according to Rabbi Yezer, Paul would have to pay $1,000 rather than just $500. And of course, the situation were flipped. Paul would end up paying $500 instead of $1,000 because we're focused on the perpetrator, on the assailant. Okay, so two stories that will highlight again this stories of bodily injury. Hahu chamara dekata yada dinoka. There was a donkey that cut off the hand of a child, and we'll see that it wasn't clear that it was a donkey as opposed to a donkey driver. But asala kamei de Rapapa bar Shmuel. So case came to Rapapa bar Shmuel. Amar lahu, and he told everybody, Zilu shumole arba dvarim. Go figure out how much the 4 payments are worth. Well, 1 second, Amrile Rava, Vaha Anan Kamisha Tanan. 1 second, our Mishnah says that there are 5 payments. Amrle, so Republic explained, no. Levarmi Nezek Kamina. I'm talking about besides the baseline payment. Of course, you're going to have to pay the baseline payment of damages. So Amrle Abaye, well, 1 second. But Vaha Chamorhu, we're talking about a donkey that caused the damage, not the donkey driver. So Vachamor Ainu Mishalam El Nezek. But a donkey only pays Nezek, only pays the actual damages, not the other 4 payments, not Tsar, Ripoy, Boshes, and Shabbos. So Amr Lahu, so Rapapa said back to them, oh, okay, so Zilu Shumule Nizke. So fine, go figure out how much the damage is. Well, 1 second. So now the other people in the area are getting involved in the conversation. 1 second, we're going to need to figure out what the value of this child is as a slave. Amr lahu, yeah. Ziu shaimu hula bekavda. Go, yeah, figure out what he's worth as a slave. So Amr lahu avua dinuka. The father of the child says, no, lo beina. I don't want to do that to this kid. It's going to harm him psychologically. To Dezila Bay Milsa. This is a very degrading thing to do to him. Might affect him psychologically if I were to make it look like I was selling him on the open market. So Amrulay, so they said to the father, 1 second, Vaha Kamachayvat like Linuka. Well, 1 second, but you're gonna harm your child financially, and this is money that belongs to your child, not to you. So Amrlahu, Lachi Gadil, Mifaise le Mididi. I'm Mididi. When he gets older, I'm going to pay him from my own stuff. So the point is that that if the father makes a commitment, so then that's considered a sufficient commitment, and he will not have to degrade his son by assessing the value as a slave. But of course, he's going to have to make his son whole when his son grows up. So Tosos here highlight an important part, because what in the fact world was Rav Papa thinking? So Zilu Shumale Arba Dvarim. So last Tosos on Pei Dalet Amanal. Zil Haya Savor, that Rav Papa thought the Adam Heziku, that it was a person who did the damage, and he thought but also Katan Kolkak Gadol Haya Demikalme Le Umakalim. That the point is that and not only that, but he thought that the minor child was old enough to be shamed, and so as a result, that's what he thought the situation was. Obviously, it turned out that the one who caused the damage was a donkey and not a person. So as a result, had it been a person, the person would have been obligated in all 5 payments. Okay, another story. There was an ox that chewed the hand of a child. The Rava came in front of Rava. Go figure out his value as a slave. They said to Rava, 1 second. You said that whenever you have to estimate somebody as a slave, we're not going to cause that payment to be required in Bavel, and we're in Bavel. So Amr lahu lo trika de itafas. No, the reason that we need the assessment is not in order to impose the penalty on the person who own the ox that caused the damage, but rather to tell us that if the person who was the victim grabs the property of the perpetrator, of the owner of the ox that caused the damage, so then will we force the victim to give back the property? And the answer is only to the extent that it exceeds the value of what he would have been owed in an actual court in Israel. Now, what is the reason that this is that we're not going to assess a person like a slave in Bavel? And what is the reason that we're not going to force the owner of the ox to pay for the damage that was done to the child? An excellent question, and that's what the Gemara is going to take up right now. Rava Lataime. Rava goes according to his reason. Da Amar Rava. Rava says, Nizke Shor B'Shor, if an ox does damage to an ox, Nizke Shor Ba'adam, or an ox is damaged by a person. Goven Oto B'Vavel. Those kind of damages, meaning if the damage is to property, we're going to collect it in Bavel. Nizke Adam Ba'adam, V'Nizke Adam B'Shor. But if the damage is to a person, Ein Goven Oto B'Vavel, we're not going to collect it in Bavel. Whoa, why not? Maishna Nizke Adam Ba'adam V'Nizke Adam B'Shor Delo. Why were we going to take? Why are we not going to collect when it comes to a damage done to a person? So the answer is Elokim be'inan, because we need Elohim, right? We need judges. Here it doesn't mean to Hashem; it's rather to judges. So it's not a kadosh term, and that's why you can say Elohim. So the point is that we're referring to judges, and when we mean judges here, we mean judges that have the special smicha from Moshe Rabbeinu that was lost in Bavel, the Leica, and there are no such judges in Bavel. Nizke Shor B'Shor V'Shor Ba'Adam Nami. Well, 1 second. Well, then why not have a person who is an ox that is damaged also be exempt? After all, there are no such judges. So we're going to have 4 different answers according to this. 4 different answers. We're going to have 4 different approaches. So approach number 1. So Elokim be'inan right? Again, Elokim be'inan v'leika, as we turn to Pei Dalet Amud Bet. So we finished the question, right? We need, even for other cases, we need expert witnesses, expert judges, or we need judges who are who have smicha, and we don't have smicha in Bavel. So Ella Maishna Shor B'Shor B'Shor Ba'Adam. What's the difference between an ox, the damages caused by an ox, and whether by a ox or a person? Because because we're fulfilling the message, the agency of the judges in Eretz Yisrael. So midi dahava ahodos v'halvos, just like we do with respect to cases of admitting loans and collecting loans. To adam ba'adam b'shor nami. Well, 1 second. Why not have damage to people also? Let us be the ones who are carrying out the situation. So just as we do with respect to admissions and loans. So Amre, they explain, when do we have this concept of fulfilling the agency of the judges in Israel? So because it's only where we're certain about it. But when we're not 100% certain, we're not going to do it. Well, 1 second. Amre, shor ba'adam nami lo kimlan begave. How can we ever be certain even about when an ox is the one that has suffered the damage? So that can't be the answer. Ella pokchazi de mizdavne Torah b'shuka, because we can just figure out how much the value is in the marketplace. Adam b'shor nami. Well, 1 second. So too, we can figure out the value of the ox of the person in the marketplace. We can see how much he would be worth as a slave. V'od tashlum kefel B'tashlim bar Bava Chamisha Nava Dekaisi Shlichosai. We could also do that. So as a result, shouldn't we? We should be able to do all kinds of penalty payments as well, because we can figure out how much the value is in the marketplace. So Amre Kika Abdina Shluchasayu B'Mamona. So with a situation, the answer is that we're doing actually shichlus is not just a general situation, but rather only where there's money involved, where it's a compensatory payment. But we will not impose it when it's a penalty. And so now we've addressed why the four times and 5 times penalty and the double penalty we won't necessarily address, even though we're talking about the value of an animal, which we're certain about. So that explains that. But Adam ba'adam, right. But ba'adam to mamonahu. But 1 second, a person's damage is also compensatory. So navat shluchusayu. So why don't we do shlichus in that situation? So kika abdina shlichusayu. When do we do shlichus again? So now effort number 4 to explain the situation is the third effort to answer the category of shlichus, the milsa de shlicha, only when it's common. Adam ba'adam lo shlicha, lo avdina shlichusayu. So when we have a person doing damage to another person, that is not something that generally happens, and so as a result, that's why we're not going to have agency from the courts in Israel. So 1 second, hare boshes de shchiach. Well, what about embarrassing people? That's something that does happen on a regular basis. Navid shlichusayu. So we should therefore again be subject to the court of the agency of the court of Israel. So Amri Hakinami, yeah, maybe we in fact do that. The Rav Papa Agbe Arba Meya Zuzai Levoshes. Rav Papa actually collected 400 zuz for humiliation in Bavel. So no, that doesn't work because Vahal lazy the Rav Papa. But the Rav Papa isn't a good. But nobody holds of Rav Papa. The Shalach le Rav Chisda Rav Nachman, because Rav Chisda asked the question to Rav Nachman. The Shalach le, and Rav Nachman sent back the message. Chisda Knasa Kal Magabe Bavel. Are you collecting penalties in Bavel? So now we're going to come up with the final situation. Where do we impose? Where do we allow courts to rule in Bavel, and where do we not? The following: that the issue is it's got to be a common situation, and it's got to involve real loss. But when you have something that's common and but is not subject to monetary loss, inami milsa or something that is not common, even if it involves a monetary loss. So lo of the initial side, then we won't have any kind of agency from Israel. So as a result, hilkach adam ba'adam even though there's some loss that's associated with it, because it's not common, lo of the initial. So as a result, we don't have the power to impose the court's decisions. Boshes, but when it comes to humiliation, even though it's common, we're not going to impose any kind of shlichus because it is there is no monetary loss that's associated with it. Okay, so now 1 second. So we had said, so what have we done? We've actually noted here, right, that apologies for not scrolling my screen. So we've noted here that Rav Papa says that we're not going to, right, we're going to collect damages in Bavel for damages caused to an ox, but we're not going to collect damages for damages caused to a person. So 1 second though, does Rava really say that we collect damages done from one ox to another? Because take a look, B'shor Govin B'Vavel, B'Hamar Rava Shor Shehizik Ein Govin Ota B'Vavel. We seem to say that when an ox does damage, it does not collect in Bavel. And Da'azikman, who is this ox damaging? But Elema Da'azik Adam, if you want to tell me it's damaging a person, my area sure Da'azik Adam, Afilu Adam Da'azik Adam, Nami ain't Govin Oso B'Vavel. if we're going to talk about an ox that's damaging a person, well, even a person who damages a person, we don't collect in Babel. So of course we're not going to collect an ox that damages a person in Babel. Ela pshita da'azik, sure. So it must be that it damaged another ox. The Katani ain't govin otoba Babel, and yet we say that you don't collect for it in Babel. So so we're going to have an effort to answer this question. We're going to have two tries. So effort number one is not going to be successful, but let's see what the effort says. So hasam betam hacha b'muad. Well, 1 second. When it's a tam, that's when we're not going to collect because that's a penalty. And hacha b'muad. And whereas when we say over here that you would collect, that's talking about a muad. And we take a look in Rashi, basically middle of the narrow lines in Rashi, maybe a little bit further down in the narrow lines. Ein govin, we don't collect when it comes to a tam. The kaimalan palga nazka knasa Kamma, because we said in the very first chapter of Bava Kamma that a partial nezek is considered a knas, and so as a result, that's why we're not going to collect. So Amar Rava ain muad b'Bavel. 1 second. Rava also said that there's no muad in Babel. Well, Amri Yaed Hasam v'ituya lahaka. No, well, we can say that the animal was warned, the owner was warned about that particular animal in Eretz Yisrael, and then brought it to Babel. And so as a result, we can have a muad in Babel. But second, v'hamilsa delo shchichahu, but that's something that's uncommon. Umilsa delo shchicha, we just said ha'amrat lo abdin shlichusayu. We said that there's no agency when it came to that situation. So da'asu rabbanan v'hasdam v'iyada hacha. So okay, so we'll say that the rabbis from there came and warned the owner over here, meaning that there were people with smicha that did it. No, but that too. So milsa delo shchicha, that also is uncommon. Va'at amrat milsa delo shchicha lo ka abdin shlichusayu. So Ella Kika Amar Rava. So we're going to revisit this entire situation. When did Rava say that you are going to collect damage done to an ox? B'shein v'regel. When it comes to eating and walking, that the mu'ad and mitchila ninhu, because in those situations the animal is considered a mu'ad in the beginning. It's from the very beginning, and so for example, if in fact the animal was rubbing against another animal in order to sort of get enjoyment, to scratch an itch, so to speak, and the animal against which it was rubbing got damaged, so that would be the situation where you would actually have to pay for the damage. Okay, so that is the background on all this situation of paying for the various forms of damage. And now we're going to turn to the 4 extra forms of damage, and the first of which was pain. And we noted in the Mishnah that one pays for pain even for damage to a nail where the damage is not permanent. After all, thank God our nails grow back. I don't know if anybody ever had a bowling ball land on their nail, but it gets all purple and stuff, but then it goes back to normal after a couple of days, or maybe a couple of weeks. So tsar kava'o b'shapud o b'masmer. We said that if the person burns somebody with a spit or a nail, so tsar shalo b'makom nezik mishtalim mantana. So who was it in our Mishnah that said that because we're dealing with pain that's paid to a pain that's for damage on a nail where it's not permanent, who's the one who says that? So Amarava ben Azai, it's ben Azai. The Tanya, Rabbi Omer Kviya Nemra Tchila, Ben Azai Omer Chabura Nemra Tchila, because Rebbe says that when we have a pasuk that I'll quote again, that says burn was said first, and Ben Azai says no, bruise was said first. Now, of course, in the actual pasuk of the word kiviyah, it was said first, because what does the pasuk say? It says kiviyah tachas kiviyah, petza tachas patza, chabura tachas chabura. So the point is that, of course, from just looking at the words in the pasuk, the word burn was said first. But what is this? So what is the argument between Rebbe and Ben Azai about? So, but my kamiflagi, what are they arguing about? Rebbe Savar, this is again all Rava explaining it. Rebbe Savar kiviyah delespa chabura mashma. That when you have the word kiviyah, it implies a burn. It implies a bruise. It implies a burn that doesn't have a bruise with it. So now, kasav rachmana chabura, and so that's what it means when it says that Rebbe says burn was said first. It means that a burn alone was said first. That when at the very beginning of the pasuk, when we started the pasuk out, we thought that a burn meant a burn without a bruise. And then, because of Rachmana Chabura, now that the Torah also wrote the word Chabura, legaluye alei Allah de kaviyah, it tells us about the nature of the burn, and it has to be to ispe ba Chabura in ilo lo, and it's only if there is a bruise with the burn will you be liable, but if not, there won't be. And Ben Azai Savar, and Ben Azai thinks the exact opposite. Kiviyah de ispa chabura mashma, that kiviyah ordinarily would mean with a bruise. Kasav rachmana chabura, and then later in that same pasuk, the Torah writes chabura, a bruise. Legaluye alei, the kiviyah delays chabura. That when we talk about a burn, we mean that it does not have a bruise with it, and so that's why that position of a Ben Azai is like our Mishnah, that even a burn that does not have a bruise, a permanent bruise that's associated with it, you will have to pay liability for. So Maskiv lo Rav Papa. Rav Papa had an objection because Adarabba, Ibcha Mistabra, it actually makes more sense to say the exact opposite. Why? Because we want Rebbe, who's usually the halacha is like, to be consistent with our Mishnah, which is a Stam Mishnah. So Rebbe Omer Kaviyah Nemer Tchila, when we say that Rebbe said that a burn was said first, Savar Kaviyah de Isba Chabura Mashma. The point is that originally they thought that Kaviyah meant with a bruise. Kasav Rachmana Chabura legaluya le de Kaviyah de Leisbe Chabura. So when it then says bruise, it means that there's a burn without a bruise. Basically, we're flipping the two positions because the issue is, just to be clear here, the Brisa only says that Rebbe says a burn was said first, and Ben Azai says a bruise was said first. But the issue is that Brisa doesn't tell us what they mean by that. So we're going to say that according to Rav Papa, when we say that Rebbe says a burn was said first, what it means is that a burn alone was said. That when it said kiviyah, it meant only a burn. And the reason that it meant only a burn is because ordinarily I might have thought a burn included a bruise. But then the Torah then said bruise, so we know that a burn does not include a bruise. And Ben Azai would say the exact opposite. Ben Azai Omer Chabura Nemra Tchila Savar Kiviyah de Leisba Chabura Mashma Kasav Rachmana Chabura Legaluya Ale de Kiviyah de Isbe Chabura in Ilolo. So Ben Azai now says that actually bruise was said first, meaning that he thinks that the word that in the end burn implies bruise, because originally I might have thought that burn would not imply bruise, but then the Torah wrote the word bruise. So as a result, that shows that now when we're talking about a burn, only when there's a bruise is there going to be liability, but if not, there won't be a liability. And ba'amas kana kaime. And when we said the statements in the brisa of Rebbe saying a burn was said first, and Ben Azai saying a bruise was said first, we're talking about what their conclusion was, right? Rava interpreted the brisa as saying what their hava amina was, but Rav Papa is saying no, it's what their conclusion was. But we can also give another interpretation. We can say that this has nothing to do with with trying to interpret the first word kiviyah, but rather we can say inami dekuli alma kiviyah bein de ispa chabura bein de leispa chabura mashma. That really kiviyah is a general term, and it can mean either with a bruise or without a bruise. V'haka, and here when we have this argument between Ben Azai and Ben Azai and Rebbe, what are they really arguing about? They're arguing about the following. As we turn to the top of Hey Amud Aleph, they're arguing about whether or not when you have a klal uprat, again, a klal uprat is a general rule followed by a specific rule. When they're next to each other, everybody agrees that the specific rule will modify the general rule. So if I say you can do whatever you want as long as you do it in Riverdale, so it means that you have to do the thing in Riverdale. But what if you have a separation, as we have here? Because in this case, we talk about a burn, then we talk about a wound, and then we talk about a bruise. So there is this discussion of petza takas patza that comes in between. So Rebbe Savar ain done an oso b'klal prat, that because we have the discussion of petza takas patza between kiviyah and chabura, so as a result, Rebbe will say we're not going to imply the narrowness, the prat of chabura on the the klal of burn, of kiviyah. And so as a result, therefore, the kiviyah means whether you have a bruise or you don't have a bruise. Uben Azai suffered done an oto b'klal prat. But Ben Azai would say you do, meaning and so as a result, when you have you have the phrase burn, it means specifically with the wound. Well, in that case, why bother to mention chabura at all, according to Rebbe? Because after all, we're not using it for this klal prat. It teaches us that you have to pay extra. Now, Rashi and Tosfos have a debate. Given the time, we won't go into the debate inside, but basically, according to Rashi, it turns out that when we say that you pay extra, it means that you pay for both a bruise and the pain associated with the burn. But according to Tosfos doesn't like that, because we saw a few minutes ago that the words petza takas patza tell us that in fact you pay for multiple things. You pay for both pain and the damages. So what does it mean to say that you pay for both? We already know that. So rather, Tosfos, and this is according to the Ri and Tosfos says the following: that actually there's a difference between a pain that results in a permanent wound and pain that does not result in a permanent wound. Even though the pain is identical, we're going to say, according to this Ledamim Yiseirim, that because there's also pain associated, there's also aggravation associated with the embarrassment as a result of the mark that you end up with. So we're going to say that you actually end up with a greater pain damage payment when you have actual physical permanent bruises than if you were to not have such bruises. So that's what the Ri learns from the Damim Yiseirim. So now that we've done all that, we've confirmed that one may need to pay for pain according to our Mishnah, even when there's no permanent damage. But what about a discussion about how one calculates the money, the amount of money to be paid for the pain? Well, for that, you're going to need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful day.
Why is it necessary to bring the argument regarding shlichut from Eretz Israel? Earlier, about 3 days ago, I think Saturday, Motzi Shabbat or Sunday, we learned that Rava, one of the reasons that Rav came to Bava. Why did he come to Bava? He brought a lot of people with him. So what was the perhaps because there was more Torah in Bava. So why couldn't Bava institute their own laws? And even if they couldn't, supposedly because maybe they didn't have smichut. But Rav, when he came and he brought the Talmidim to Bava, because there was more Torah in Bava than there was in Israel at the time, then he could have brought enough people with that had smicha to Bava with him, and then they could have established their own laws in Bava. Why do we have to? They even bring this whole discussion that regarding the necessity to consider shlichut from Israel in making legal decisions regarding these matters.
So it's an excellent question, and I know that this answer is not going to be satisfactory. But the way I understand it is that first of all, we're talking about smicha, so it has to be from Rav to from teacher to student in a direct path from Moshe Rabbeinu. So the issue is that that path had already been broken. And so it wasn't possible to redeem it. I don't know. I believe that by the time of Rab, it didn't exist in it may not have even existed in Eretz Yisrael. And even if it did exist in Eretz Yisrael, it's clear that he did not bring sufficient teachers to enable it to continue. What can be odd, of course, is a situation where you have greater learning in one place, even though there's less sort of tradition in that place than there is elsewhere. So for example, it just lahavdil, right? The point is that in Europe there's a tradition that goes back literally thousands of years of Jewish learning, and yet at the moment, if you look at Europe versus the United States, right, there's way more learning here in the United States. So one can imagine how that can happen. That even though there may be a longer tradition and a greater tradition with actual true smicha in a particular place, you can imagine that it might have been cut off. So, but I don't have a really satisfactory philosophical answer for your question. It seems like the answer from a practical standpoint is that those rabbis did not exist in Bavel. Whether maybe they chose not to go to Bavel because they felt that they needed to stay in Eretz Yisrael. Again, I don't have a great answer to that question. If I find one, I will certainly share with you.
All right.
But you should call on the question because it's a way better question than I have answers. So my apologies for that. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
A good day.